I'm Brendan Donnelly. I'm the leader of the Rejoin EU party. We live today in a strange twilight world of political discussion in this country about Brexit. More and more people recognize that Brexit has been a failure, in many ways a disaster. Even government ministers who've been so reticent to talk about the problems of Brexit are now shamefacedly admitting that it's an anchor, a drag on economic progress. But every time they say that, they have to add to it that they don't intend to do anything about it. They're not going to rejoin the single market, the customs union, freedom of movement is ruled out, and ruled out in more categorical terms almost than was the case at the beginning of the Labour government. The most recent convert to talking about Brexit is Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England. And he said very eloquently in a speech the other day that Brexit is acting as a drag on our economic progress, on our economic growth. But he protected himself politically by saying, of course, he isn't going to comment on the policy of Brexit because that's a political decision. That evasion of responsibility is perhaps pardonable in an official, although he was appointed largely because he was supposedly someone who thought that Brexit could be made to work. But that evasion of responsibility is not pardonable in the political leadership that we have. It's not pardonable in Starmer and Lammy, who said very different things only a few years ago. And it's a dysfunction of our political system that more and more people, even politicians, come to recognize that Brexit isn't working, Brexit is doing active harm, and yet they think there's nothing they can do about it. It's not so much that there's nothing they can do about it, there's nothing they want to do about it. And it's for clearly electoral reasons. They're afraid of offending the right-wing press. They're afraid that reform under a revived Nigel Farage will be able to take advantage of any supposed move towards Europe to claim that Starmer and his friends are secret remainers. So what's going to change this? Is this a sustainable position? I doubt very much whether it's a sustainable position. You can only carry on for so long pretending that black is white and 2 equals 5. I think three factors are going to press Starmer and his Labour Party, or more Starmer and his government, towards a much more positive view of the European Union and wanting to get closer to the European Union. The first, I think, is economic. The likelihood of the government, the Labour government, being able to pay in the way that it wants for better public services at present rates of growth is small. And that problem is only going to get worse. I think that in a couple of years' time, the Labour government will be confronted with the pressing need to convince its supporters and potential voters that it has an economic plan, one that's going to increase the growth prospects of the United Kingdom. And I can't see anything other than the European Union, an attempt perhaps to join the customs union or the single market as a narrative for improving British growth prospects. It may be that it won't be possible simply to join the single market or the customs union. In that case, the natural, logical next step will be to embrace fully the idea of rejoining the European Union. The second factor that I think will be operative on Starmer and his government will be the role of Donald Trump. Donald Trump is somebody who clearly is only interested in American welfare in the shortest possible terms. He threatened the European Union principally, but also the United Kingdom with tariffs that would make it much more difficult for even the meager rates of growth that are envisaged for this country to be attained. But there'll be a political divide as well. More and more people in this country will be asking themselves, should we be associated with the American view of the world, the Trumpian view of the world, or the European view of the world? There's going to be a clash, an almighty clash, it seems to me, over the coming years between the Trumpian view of the world and the European Union's view of the world. And the question is, on what side of that divide do we stand in this country? It's not true that Trump is an attractive figure to most British voters. Most British voters regard him with amusement or even contempt. I don't think it will be advantageous to Nigel Farage to be seen to be associated with Donald Trump. in spite of the attempts by some of the right-wing press to present him as a bridge, an intermediator between the United Kingdom and Donald Trump. I think that is the reverse of the truth. The more that pro-Europeans can identify Farage, Brexit, and Trump together, the better it will be for our cause. And the third pressure that I think will be on Starmer will be political. It's quite extraordinary that so many people already have come to the conclusion that Brexit is a disaster, with no political leadership to speak of, certainly not from the two main parties, and only very intermittently from any of the smaller parties. That pressure can only grow. And this is where it seems to me the Rejoin EU party comes into the picture. When UKIP set out on the road that they set out 20, 30 years ago, they were very much a fringe party. Nobody took them seriously. They didn't have the big backers. They didn't have the support of the press that they later acquired. If I'm right, and the present position of recognizing the damage of Brexit, and yet being willing to do nothing about it is unsustainable, then I can well believe that in a couple of years' time, there will be a political avalanche of people wanting to dissociate themselves from Brexit. And for politicians, for practicing politicians, the most important manifestation of that is people voting against them and for Rejoin. We in the Rejoin EU party will be looking over the whole course of this parliament to be sending in as many local and by-elections as possible, giving people the opportunity to say that they want to rejoin the European Union and that there are votes to be won by a positive attitude towards Europe and votes to be lost by a negative or a hesitant attitude towards Europe. That's the task that we set ourselves. We're going to be the grit in the oyster, if you like. And it's a task we look forward to with enthusiasm and relish. And it's one that I think will be successful much more quickly than many people believe at the moment. It's rather politically uncool, or politically unacceptable to say that we should soon rejoin the European Union. We can talk about resetting relations, we can talk about better relations and a new mood, but none of that's good enough. If we want to reassert the future of this country as it should be reasserted, to have us at the tables of decision-making where we ought to be, we must rejoin the European Union. And that's what our party is about. And that's what our party, I hope very much, is going to contribute towards bringing about over the next 4 years.
Vote Rejoin EU. Join the EU vision.